It's my pleasure to be here today to interact with you regarding the social summit that will be convened under South Africa's presidency of the G20. I believe my colleague, Mr. Ben Joubert, has shared with you an overview of the G20 presidency for South Africa, and now you have an idea of the evolution of the G20, where this grouping comes from, how it came about, from the elevation from a grouping of ministers of finance to leaders level up to the very last presidency of the G20, the first cycle where South Africa is presiding over the last presidency in the first cycle, and then the second cycle will commence. The idea of the Social Summit, Excellencies and colleagues, was conceived by the Federal Republic of Brazil when they were overseeing the presidency of the G20 in 2024. Brazil was the president of the G20 before handing over the baton to South Africa last year. So they came up with the idea of a social summit. A social summit is but a unique project that brings about legacy of the G20 and that takes the G20 to the people. I'm sure Mr. Joubert has shared with you the concept behind our presidency and our theme. Now, looking into the theme, when in the early stages of the planning, when we were planning the G20, we then decided that it is important as a developing country and as a fourth presidency under the South, the developing South, the developing nations of the G20. It first started with Indonesia in 2022, went on to India in 2023, then Brazil took over in 2024 in South Africa. Is now the current chair of the G20 or the current president of the G20 in 2025. So the four previous presidencies of the G20 have been from emerging markets or developing nations. So as a result, it's now obvious that development would be at the heart. Taking it to the people, solidarity, equality, and sustainability, it then was incumbent upon us to follow on the footsteps of Brazil to convene a social summit. Under the Brazilian presidency, the social summit meant stretching it further than the 13 engagement groups, traditional engagement groups that are recognized by the G20. How the setup works is that you've got 13 engagement groups that are traditionally recognized by the G20. That would be your business 20, your labor 20, your youth 20, your civil 20, women 20, and the others. There's a list that goes up to 13. When you look at this list, however, it's confined according to sectors, but it doesn't necessarily mean the work that is done outside the 13 engagement groups that are traditionally recognized by the G20 is not recognized. How Brazil saw it is that there is also a lot of work that's done outside these 13 engagement groups. There's Interface 20, there's Values 20, there's Flavelas 20 under the Brazilian presidency, which under our presidency would be then, as announced by our president, Township 20. What that means then is that we need space to also allow these other engagement groups, informal engagement groups, we refer to them as a presidency, that do very important work. We need space to allow them as well to showcase the work that they do, to contribute to the presidency. So the Social Summit is one such platform. This is a platform that brings together, that takes the G20 to the people, that is one. It's a platform that will work to take the presidency to the G20. What is the legacy that we are trying to establish through the G20? How are we going to do that? And are we in communication with our people? Yes, we are, because we plan to take this platform that's called the Social Summit to bring all the stakeholders together and say, how do we move about going forward? What is the legacy regarding our presidency? I believe the Social Summit as well offers a reflection on us as an opportunity for us as a country to reflect on the state of affairs and to come up with solutions, to be in dialogue within the confines of the G20 to say, what is the state of affairs in our country? What are the main issues? I can think of migration, I can think of healthcare, employment, I can think of the state of the economy, and I can think about social relations over and above. So these are some of the issues that we will bring all stakeholders, and under the umbrella of the Social 20, we are not going to be selective. We are going to there's a call out that will be made in July. There was an initial meeting at the presidency last week convened by the Office of the President, where we were planning for the social summit. How do we go about? Where will this be hosted, and in what format or in what fashion? There will be a call out to all stakeholders, all organizations across sectors, whether be it youth, whether be it women, whether it be children. There will be a call out for all organizations that do work within the confines of the G20, even outside the confines of the G20. Those organizations or those groupings, those community service groupings that have a stake or would like to contribute to the Social 20, there will be a call out for them to come together, and then we will then propose and say, here is a framework that we have designed for the hosting of the social summit. What is your take on it? What would you like to see? At the end, we're hoping that the social summit will produce a declaration that will then be handed over at the Leaders Summit. But prior to that, there needs to be a lot of work that has to happen on the ground. We will be also bringing on board the 13 engagement groups, as well as the informal engagement groups, your V20, your Interfaith 20, Disability 20, all those informal groupings will also be invited as stakeholders in the social summit. So as of now, we are hoping that as people gain insight about the social summit, and are able to make a distinction between the social summit and the leaders summit, and also the areas of convergence and divergence between the two. There's more areas of convergence between the leaders summit, with an understanding that within the G20 process or the mechanism, there's the Sherpa track, there's the finance track, there's the social track, which is the engagement groups, and then on top of that, we are now hosting a social summit. The president of the country has been requested via Tiego and the presidency to nominate the conveners of the social summit. Under the Brazilian presidency, the convener of the social summit was in the office of President Lula. So we are following the same approach, of course, adding our African spice to it, if I put it that way, for lack of a better word. If I say we are adding our own African flavor to that. So the convener of the social summit, the final decision rests with the president. We've made recommendations to President Ramaphosa to say, these are the people that we feel from the government side, there must be a convener. From the civil society side, there must be a convener. We've put up names for the president to consider. However, I need to inform the collective here that the final decision will be by President Motlhamme Ramaphosa, who will tell us who will convene the social summit. Once we have our conveners, we are hoping that in the next week or two, we will have our conveners announced, formally announced. Then we can then work on the call out, where we will have a meeting, a community meeting, or a meeting of all stakeholders, where we will invite all stakeholders across the board to come together and share with us insight of what they envisage in terms of the Social 20. Our understanding is the outcome of the Social 20 will be more, Social Summit will be more practical. It would be the kind of outcome that we can say, here are legacy projects that we can identify that would then mean is linked to the outcome of our G20 presidency. The planning for the Social Summit is still at beginning stages. However, we foresee a mechanism in our framework document that we are working on, which I would say once it's finalized and approved, I will share with the organizers of today's roundtable, then they can distribute to the rest of the collective. We foresee an organizing committee that would be, we planned that there would be an organizing committee that would be the go-in-between between the presidency, Tiego, and civil society. The organizing committee, the members will be nominated from civil society. There would be one or two representatives from government, from both departments, Tiego and presidency. But we were hoping that, we're envisaging that the majority of the stakeholders in the organizing committee would be more civil society. I need to emphasize that our role as government is not to actually immerse ourselves in the social summit, but to make sure that we oversee the planning and let civil society and the people of South Africa actually be the main stakeholders and the main runners of the show. As of now, we are trying to establish exactly where we will host the social summit. Under Brazilian presidency, they chose a setting where everybody was able to come together, and for 3 days they were able to showcase their work. There was also a cultural element, and there was also dialogue, as well as at the end there was also a press release where President Lula was able to announce the outcome of the social summit under the Brazilian presidency. We have followed the same approach under the planning for South Africa's social summit. It will be the dates that we have identified is 18 to 20 November. We are hopeful that we're trying to establish if we can host the social summit at the Pretoria Showgrounds here in Pretoria. However, it's not final. As I indicated, it's the planning phase of the social summit. We are in contact with City of Tshwane to see if the showgrounds in Pretoria West would be a suitable venue for us to host the social summit. Our minister and the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Minister Ronald Ozila Mula, has indicated that since the summit itself, the Leaders Summit, will be hosted in Nasrec in Johannesburg, it would make sense to have the social summit being hosted in Pretoria. So the city of Tshwane and the city of Johannesburg are the conveners of the Urban 20, so it makes sense that between the two of them we spread the two major activities, which is the Leader Summit, which will go to the city of Johannesburg in Nasrec, and then the Social Summit then would go to the city of Tshwane, if we agree on hosting at the showgrounds. So how we envisage it is for 3 days, all the stakeholders will come together. We will have a program that is designed according to the theme of the presidency, and that speaks to the work that all the stakeholders do, including formal traditional engagement groups and informal ones. Everybody will have, I suppose at the time, by November, all the traditional engagement groups and the informal engagement groups would have hosted their summits. So they would have an outcome as to the work. The work that they do currently will have culminated, whether it's Women 20, whether it's Business 20, most of the engagement groups are starting to host their midterm conferences, and then they're moving towards the third quarter of the year, they're moving towards hosting their summits. So at the time of the hosting of the social summit, all the engagement groups, and I can think of V20 as well. I think I have the V20, Manchester, I have the V20 calendar. I know that at the time that the social summit is hosted, you shall have had your summit, so you'll have an outcome as an engagement group of what is going on and how did your work actually culminate into. So at the time that the social summit is hosted, we will have an outcome for all the engagement groups regarding the work that they've done for the year. So that outcome also will form part and parcel of the social summit. All the engagement groups, all the stakeholders, community service organizations, individuals will have a chance to go into dialogue together and to also showcase the work that they've done. Out of the dialogue, out of the communication, there will be a final communique for the social summit. Legacy projects will be identified, and all the legacy projects and the final communique will then be handed over to the leaders, and it will be presented at the Leaders Summit. At this point in time, planning phases is still starting, but what I can inform the collective is that in July, there will be a call-out for all the organization, all interested individuals, and at the time, we are hopeful that the call-out will be presided over by the conveners of the social summit, where we will call together all the organizations, all the stakeholders, and inform that officially this is South Africa launching the hosting of the social summit. We will then try to get the buy-in of all stakeholders and get ideas as to how they envisage this process to unfold. So at that time, what I can indicate to the collective is that we have the contact details of almost everyone in the room. We will also liaise with Ines to get more of those that we wouldn't have gotten, so we will get them. And the call-out will be announced on all media platforms, including the SABC social media platforms. We will try to make sure that it reaches as many South Africans as possible and ensure that the information goes out there on time so that people can be able to participate and be part of this important milestone where the conveners of the social summit will be informing the population of South Africa and the citizens of this country about this important social summit that will be hosted by the president, to engage the people of South Africa and to involve them in the G20 process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, you have